Happy New Year, Wrecker.
Happy New Year to you too, Nick. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Things are good.
Things are good. I was getting excited to get this going again. I mean, we had a couple of people actually ask me, it's like, hey, what's with the break? And, when do you guys get going again? Well, we're starting again today.
Yes, we are. And then we're seeing each other in a few weeks. I'm coming to visit you in Germany, in
Well,
Deutschland.
you Deutschland, you do a little bit of a Deutschland tour. Like if you're a musician, you would say it's a world tour, even though you're just hopping over the Atlantic, really.
I'm going to Hamburg and Cologne. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And you do your famous seminar on how to write an introduction.
That's a very American way of looking at the world, by the way, to say a world tour and then you just stay in one country. Like we have a World Series of baseball, which is a bunch of American teams and a couple of Canadian teams, right? And then
True. True.
our
True.
concerts, our bands do a world tour and they do a bunch of US states and then they do London.
And Berlin, maybe Berlin.
And
Yeah,
Berlin,
that's
right?
that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, and every now and then, once in a decade, they hop over to Australia and do a concert in Sydney because it's nice and warm. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's the world tour in music. Anyway, dude, I got a topic. I got a topic for to get us going, and it's about co-authorship. And the background is that here in Europe, I know. I don't know about you, but we finished our teaching. So we are in this beautiful period between one term and the other term where actually, there's no more teaching, paper has been graded and all that sort of stuff. And now we're getting back to our revisions on our papers and so forth. Also, you probably know this. You always say I'm third author or last author. That's because I work a lot with more junior colleagues, with postdocs, PhD students. In Europe, we tend to have a lot more of them than you guys do in the US, right? And so anyway, so I have a lot to deal with co-authoring papers with people that are not, Nick Parente, or, not my friends and peers on the same level, but rather with people that are in very different situations. And I swear to God, for almost 20 years now, there's always the same issues that appear. And I think there's some of them are persistent and some of them are sort of new, I think. And I think we can talk about this sort of what makes a good author, cool co-author, what do co-authors have to do, and how do we decide on the issues that appear in co-authoring papers together? Because, let's face it, how many papers do you really write solo? Have you written a solo paper yet?
Yeah, but not in a top journal, just like book chapters and things like that. So how about you?
I do one every 5 or 6 years or so. Yeah. And then I enjoy that. We can talk about that too. It's a very different thing, isn't it? You feel very naked. I feel very naked if it's a single authored paper. It's just like it's everything in there is then by definition me. And you can't hide behind anything, behind co-author or anything, right? So you feel quite naked. It's your voice, your approach, your idea, your writing, your everything.
Well, my one solo authored paper that I'm really proud of was in that digital innovation handbook, and it's about agility as the root metaphor for the digital age. I think it's brilliant and profound, and I put it out there thinking this is wonderful, right? And because there's freedom in a book chapter, right? They just edit you lightly, but you can say what you want, whereas in journal articles you have to go through an editorial process and you can't say what you want. So on the one hand, you're kind of naked, but on the other hand, you're able to say what you want, right? Which I think is kind of cool about solo authoring. Anyway, so today, the co-author episode, we're going to talk about co-authoring.
Yeah. And let me hit you off with a story. So last week, one of the co-authors that I work with, he called me up and said, Jan, can we talk? And, when they ask you like this, you say, okay, well, there's an issue that needs to be discussed. Can we talk? No context, no nothing. All right. So, and then we talk, and it's about some other member from the co-authoring team not pulling their weight, like not contributing. This is a paper we've been working on for several years, multiple revisions. So, it's a long process, and which also means lots of opportunities for members of the team to really put in and contribute something, writing, analysis, reading, ideas, anything really, right? So it could be a lot of things. And here the situation that, this person felt that this other person didn't pull the weight. Now, that's not necessarily a new thing. We've heard these stories over and over again. What I found striking is this was a junior co-author complaining about another junior co-author. So it's junior people not pulling their weight. Now, the normal story goes, it's like, oh, I'm working with my supervisor and this guy just put his name on it and he gives me 5 comments and now he wants to be first named author. We've heard this story over and over again that, young people feel that their old professors don't really pull their weight in co-authoring. What I think is new here is that I have now several situations where junior co-authors complain about other junior co-authors that they're not pulling their weight, whereas the senior people, do contribute more than they should or whatever else. Have you had that?
Well, yeah. So let's go back. So I'll give you a couple of ideas on co-authoring. The first is we know that co-authoring is getting increasingly frequent, and author teams are getting bigger and bigger. And I think that's largely because of incentives, right? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the incentive for publishing was you published your research. And maybe you had your advisor on there. But in the US in the old days, the advisor would try to not be on a couple of your papers so that you had your own voice and your own reputation.
And your own profile. Yeah.
And your own profile. And they were already tenured full and they weren't counting their publications. So if they were added to your publication or not, it didn't matter to them. This is in the US. I know in Germany, you have more of a lab model where the professor has the lab and anything done in his lab, he of course gets authorship on, right? So that's in the old days, kind of the assumption for the lab model. But I think because senior professors, everybody is now counting, that senior professor is not going to, encourage their student who they poured their effort into to go publish without them. They'll be a co-author, and rightfully so, right? So you're finding that dynamic of solo authored papers, particularly for junior people who are starting out their career, is almost non-existent because you're always co-authoring with your advisor who wants publication still. And then these junior people, if you have an MISQ and your second author, your third author, your fourth author, and you have 2, 3 of those, right? It doesn't matter that it's not yours. So the junior people are starting to collaborate a little bit more, and they're leveraging. I'll co-author with you, you co-author with me. We leverage ourselves up. We get more of a number than we would have had we done our own research. So we're seeing an explosion in collaboration. Junior, senior people, you with your advisor, juniors with juniors. It's everywhere. So what we want to do today, right, is come up with the rules of co-authorship. What should you do? And why? And I think the key that you're bringing up is one that there's our junior people and they have certain expectations. No one ever taught them this is what a co-author should and shouldn't do. And so they have certain role models that they see and they think they can act like those role models. And maybe it's not explicit for anyone what is expected of you as a co-author and as you revise and that sort of thing. Right. So what are those expectations? Let's start with junior and junior. The scenario you said, what are the expectations a junior person should have for a junior person if they're like 2 of 5 people on a paper? What would you expect? Like, what do you do to deserve co-authorship?
Well, you can look at it in multiple ways, right? So one of them is from the perspective of ethics, and there are a bunch of associations and, other types of institutions that give you a bunch of norms, right? So for example, I'm pretty sure it would be the same in the US, but in Germany, the main federal research ministry, they have rules for that. Yeah. Something like the credit author rules. And they say like, look, co-authorship is warranted if one of these conditions are being met. Yeah. You participate in the idea development, you participate in the analysis, you participate in the writing, the revising, and the editing. These are 5 situations where you participate actively in these. You can say that co-authorship is warranted. What I missed out, like there's 2 important notes here. One of them is, well, there was no funding acquisition. I didn't mention that. And there was no general supervision. Yeah, supervision and funding acquisition and project management per se are not, warranting co-authorship on the one hand. On the other hand, I said participate. I didn't say contribute, or I didn't say lead, I didn't say do much, I just said participate. And I think there is sometimes the crux, because that could mean something like, oh, look, hey, I was there in every call, didn't say anything, didn't write anything, but did I participate? Sure, I did participate, right? So that's one way to look at it. Then I guess there's another level that looks at, hey, what's the norm in your institution, in your university, in your lab? You call it a lab, right? And then sometimes you have very different norms. The traditional norm that everyone fears these days is the head of the lab is always going to be on the paper. That's a norm. Yeah, some people follow that. Some places have other norms. Some disciplines have other norms, right? I think I forgot which one, but one of them always goes by alphabetically. So if you're Aaron Aronson, you're good. And if you're Will Funderals, you're bad because you're always going to be at the end, right? And as a wrecker, you're sort of like,
somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, exactly.
Well, I think there are 2 extremes, right? In practical, I guess, U.S. management and information systems authorship, I think there's the extreme case, and this was my stats teacher, Jack Deep Singh. He's a professor in marketing. This is what he told us when he taught us PhD. He said, the only way you can be an author is if you're actively writing and making an intellectual contribution. If there are no words that you generated, and this doesn't mean editing, he thinks editing a paper someone else wrote is not authorship. Analyzing data, collecting data, not authorship. None of these things enable you to get authorship. The only thing, so this is kind of the extreme version, I would say, that most people don't stick with, but that is out there. That unless you're making fundamental intellectual contributions, putting paragraphs down, you're not an author. Everything else you should get acknowledgement. That's kind of the one extreme. The other extreme is you have a research group, and maybe you don't do a lot this time. You'll do a lot next time, and we have 5 projects we're doing, and a different person takes the lead, and really they're responsible for it. But you're part of a team, and everybody stewards the data, helps with the analysis, helps where they can. And the trick is to knock out a few papers with this team, take turns being first author, and then sometimes any particular paper, maybe you didn't do a lot, but you're part of the team. That's kind of the other extreme. And there you'll see times, with your German Herr Doctor professor, where the guy gets a paper published. He maybe funded it and whatever, but he never actually read the paper. And yet he's got papers on his name that are published that he never read, right? So those are maybe the 2 extremes, right?
There are 2 extremes. I agree, right? And then you can sort of tilt towards one side more than the other. For example, I have that rule. You got to write. You got to contribute to the writing. If you don't write, and no, that's not commenting and that's not editing, it's actually really putting down some material. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it ends up in the paper eventually, but at some stage in one of the draft versions, you wrote something. Yeah, you wrote, and because that's a way of expressing intellectual contribution, you write down an idea. Yeah, it's not worth it if you just voice it. Yeah, so that could be a rule that I follow as well. I wanted to start a little bit earlier. So I think one of the big issues that especially junior people have, which is a rule and basically an assumption, if you want. So they assume that authorship has something to do with fairness, and I don't think it has, and I don't think it should. Yeah, co-authoring a paper is not fair, and co-authoring paper probably shouldn't be fair. If it were fair, everyone is exactly equal. That is one of the most ineffective and inefficient coordination mechanisms you can possibly have for having a paper. I've worked with some people who try to be really fair and really equal, and we're not going anywhere. Why not? Because every single tiny decision about every terminology, about every idea, about every sentence, about everything then requires consensus. You're not going to get anywhere. So no, it's not, it shouldn't be fair. Everyone should not be of an equal weight and so forth. So one of the best ideas is to be a little bit unfair. And then the question is, okay, well, in that unfairness, where some people do more and other people do less. Well, one of the ways you can, reward this is, of course, by the order of authorship.
Right. And the first author should do it, right? The first author is responsible for the paper. The first author is responsible for revising, for leading, and for making sure that everything gets done, right? And if the first author
he makes decision or she makes decision, they make the decisions. If there's 2 options, well, make a call. Like I see more. That's the main role. I think everyone is responsible for the paper. If I'm last author, that's still my paper. My name is on that.
Yeah. Yep.
But if I have a first author, I would expect him. Look, okay, we can do this. We can do this. You tell me. This is your paper. That's how I would look at it. And you get rewarded for that by first author, by being named.
But the one dysfunction that I see the most often is that someone actually did contribute in the first round. And then as rounds go by, they kind of disappear from the effort, right? You don't see them doing a whole lot. And the big issue there is that they think it's almost like and I've actually seen this. I've seen people get kicked off of papers in like 3rd revision or something like that. And they contributed to the first round. And the reason they do that is because their co-authors are getting a little upset that there's significant revisions to do and they're not helping. They've kicked them off of papers. And then meanwhile, the person who is kicked off is very disgruntled because they feel like they did a lot of work already and earned their way on and don't have to do everything. Let the lead author do it, right? So there's this idea of, I already paid my dues, therefore I don't have to do more. And I think to be an author, you have to follow it throughout, right? You can't just do something, say there, I've earned my authorship, and then go away, right?
Yeah.
I think you're perfectly within your rights to kick people off in situations like that.
So I haven't had that, but I had certain people, like several people ask me to say, like, can we kick this person off? And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, that creates a lot of, tension and distress. And, it's not going to be nice for anyone, really. It's not a nice situation. It's not a nice call to be made. You don't want to be the person either. So I usually would then tend to say, like, keep it on. Yeah. And then on the other hand, then, you have many, many papers where people are left on the paper that probably shouldn't be on. Yeah. So, but I don't have a good solution to this. I see the issue, and it does happen. And I think, the best rule of protection is that I have is, first of all, expect it, prepare for it. So, and second, of course, never be that guy.
Yeah. Earlier you said it's an ethical issue, right? Yeah. What kind of human being are you that puts your name on a paper and doesn't contribute continuously throughout the hard process of getting one published? If you're that type of human being that doesn't do anything and doesn't proactively do anything, I know there are people who wait for, other people to tell them what to do. All right. So I was at Georgia State and I was doing an invited talk. I had a group of young people around me. They have a huge group. They're a very cool place. But this came to me and I never thought of it before, but it totally made sense that a PhD program, you're supposed to start a student. And I think a lot of people are very good students and they start their PhD programs as good students. But the idea is by the time you're done with your PhD program, you shouldn't just be a good student doing what the professor who knows everything is telling you to do. You should be the person. You have had a successful PhD study. If your advisor asks, if you know more than your advisor about your dissertation topic.
Absolutely.
And your advisor asks you, like Kalle Luutinen, right? Asks me when he has institutional theory stuff because he knew he did, right? Because he knew I was, right? When you pass your advisor in the subject area you spent, then you've done a PhD. And I think there are too many people who get PhDs doing what their advisor said and then continue on even afterwards, just doing what they're the methods person. And you tell me what to do. You co-authors tell me what to do. They're not proactive. They're just responsive, being a good, student throughout their life. And that's not a professor. It's not an equal collaborator, right? That's
A, that. B, also think it is potentially dangerous for their careers. It doesn't look like that because in the beginning, they're wonderful co-authors because, these are the guys that are really good at Python and R or whatever, and they run the stats for you much better than I can, right? Yeah. So they're much faster with this or whatever, right? So they can do this much better, which makes them a wonderful co-author to work with. So then in the beginning, they put out a lot of papers with their name on it, and they look like really, really good. And then at some stage, people will expect them to have ideas, to lead the groups, to have contributions that go beyond being really, really good with the stats packages. Then it shows, and then people get disappointed, right? And then it, sometimes the situation, whoa, okay, well, maybe you were in the shadow of other good people for too long. And, people have to step out of the shadows at some stage. And I think sometimes if you're, as a senior person, working too hard and too well with the junior people, you literally have to step away and say, like, you better go and do your thing without me. Yes, we work well together, but you got to, step free and do your own thing and show that you can do it.
And that's probably my problem as a senior person when I work with junior people is that I really like, as we know, we've discussed this on the episode many times, I like to read. I like to get into the kind of cumulative tradition. And sometimes I get lost in that. Like my favorite part of being an academic is I'll lose 2 days reading some obscure area of research. And I like that. But because I do that, I end up, maybe having a certain perspective on the theory section of papers, right? So that is oftentimes fairly deep. And then I end up being deeper than my junior colleagues in that domain. And then I end up doing it. And it's like, I shouldn't be doing their thinking and their, so I have to have some discipline to, if I'm with the junior colleague, and I've even had a junior colleague tell me once that, oh, I mean, I could do that, but you know it all and you do it so much quicker and everything. And I remember him saying this to me and I'm thinking, oh, really? Yes, I could do it quicker and I could do most things quicker. But just because I can doesn't mean I should for this paper. It doesn't mean it's good for either of us, right? Because then in the revision, I'll have to do it. And then
it is not good in the long run. Not for you. It's fine for you. It's bad for them. I had the same situation. I'm working on this paper with 5 people. And most of them are junior, and one of them is a senior professor, doesn't do anything. Yeah, these people still exist, of course. So, and then it's like, okay, we got to write this theory, right? We've got to write the discussion and theoretical contributions. Okay. Yeah, Jan, you're better than this. Why don't you write it? Well, and I was sitting there thinking like, well, I shouldn't. Honestly, I should not, because you guys, you're all building your career, and this paper will help every single one of you, right? It's not a zero-sum game, right? It helps every single one of you, but of course it won't if you never learn it.
Yeah. And we're building athletes here. The idea is that when you and I are both retired in the Bahamas and drinking our Mai Tais, right? These young people we're working with are going to be the professors that guide young people in the future, right? And if they don't know how to put together a good argument on a front end, how the hell are they going to guide a young person? So really, it's our job. It's our ethical to not do the job for young people. It's to make them do it. Can we say this? Wrecker and Nick's rule for collaborating with us if you're a junior to us. You have to do the writing, and we're not.
Yeah. The way that I always put it is you got to write your own papers. You have to write your own papers. I cannot write the papers for you, and I shouldn't. And it'd be very harmful if I did. Yeah. So that's, I think I'm trying to express the same thing. And it's a little bit like, I know it sounds arrogant and sort of, down from the top, but the reality is, well, you got to learn to write a discussion section. You got to learn to write an implications for theory section. You got to learn to write a theoretical development section. If you always just work with Kalle and let Kalle write that, how you ever going to get better?
Kalle's actually very good. What he'll do is he edits. So, and when he edits, he'll tell you, this is not strong. This is not strong. This makes no sense. He'll put those things, and then he'll actually help make your argumentation better, because that's kind of an art as well. But Kalle doesn't write paragraphs for his co-authors. He forces you, he talks to you and says, do this, this, and this, right? But I think I should adopt that as my role model more. I think I do too much writing for my junior co-authors. And yeah, I think from now on, Wrecker, you turned me. From now on, I don't do writing. I'm done writing.
You should. Well, there's some exceptions to this rule, I think, because the other part of the reality is there are.
If I'm first author, I'll write. Right. Well, so one way that you should write is, of course, if you're first author.
There's a few exceptions. So number one, of course, if you're first author, then that's your job. Second, there are some situations where someone in the author team is just a much better writer. So for example, you and I work together with Brian, and hands down, he's the best writer of the three of us.
Oh, he's so good.
Yeah. So in most of the papers, they are Brian et al., Brian and Nick, Brian and Jan, Brian and blah, blah, blah. And the reason is that we all love his voice much better than our own voice. So he does most of the writing, and we let him do most of the writing. So most of our job is talking, and editing, and talking and editing. And here's the point. But really, you express it in your words. But then again, this is not a junior-senior situation. So I do think that the senior-senior, the peer co-authorship, is completely different. It works completely differently, because you don't have any of this sort of you're the learner, you're the learned, I'm teaching you, you're building a career, we've had our career, blah, 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 right? So it's a very different model. So let's stick with the junior senior one, because we had you got to write your own paper rule. The one rule that I that I want to voice is always contribute more than needed, never less. Yes. And the way what I mean here is, if there is a slight tinge of doubt, if someone in your author team or someone else, if anyone ever comes up and says, like, I'm not sure this person hasn't done enough to, then you probably haven't done enough. Simple.
Yeah, I like that.
So in case, if you're fourth author out of five, I don't care. Just do more than what you would normally expect a fourth author person to do. Just do more. If everyone just does more, then all this situation would never exist. Then we would never have a situation where people say, like, I'm not sure you should be on this paper. So I do think if there's a little bit of doubt, then there is probably something to it. And then you probably shouldn't be on that paper. Think about that. Like, not you, but everyone.
And this is important. There are two mindsets, and this isn't just for writing papers. I think this is for life. If you are hard on other people, like you have high expectations for other people, but you're very generous with yourself and entitled with yourself, then you're bound to be unhappy. Other people will always fall short of your high expectations, and you will always think you deserve things you probably don't deserve, right? So what you want to do is flip that. You want to be generous with other people. Realize they're flawed humans. Realize they're probably not doing a prayer. Just encourage them to, and be really hard on yourself. Force yourself to contribute. Force yourself to do well. Have your expectations very high. Don't be this entitled person. And I think if you do that in any part in life, but co-authoring is a good one too. It's like, and I really like that. I like the idea of always do more. If there's any doubt, then you'd, and here's the problem is sometimes people come in as role players. Like, hey, you know, this particular method real well, the statistical method. So I want you to just come on to do that statistical method. So what you're going to do is come on the paper, do that method. And anytime we ask you to do the method, you'll do it. Now, from my standpoint, that might be good enough, because I'm taking care of the rest of the paper. You're handling the method. It's a win-win. And I have many different co-authorships like this. But from your standpoint, if you're the person with the method, I think you should hold yourself to a higher standard. I think you should be like, yes, I'm going to do the method, but you know what? I'm going to read this literature that we're attempting to contribute to. I'm going to engage my intellect. And the reason I'm going to engage my intellect beyond my role playing in this paper is because I'm ambitious. And I want to be a better scholar. I want to one day have my own junior faculty. I want to publish at even higher levels, right? I want to mature as a human being. And I'm not going to do that being a little role player with my little topic modeling expertise, right? And just doing that for papers. You need to hold yourself to a higher standard.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's exactly what I mean. And that's what I said, like, that's just one of the striking things that I've noticed over the last decade or so, that we've always had the situation that, you know, we're working with some colleagues, usually our advisor, whatever else, that didn't pull their weight. And that usually is, at least in Europe, that was always a big source of issues and frustration and so forth. Right. So we do come out of situations, and that will continue to some extent. But what I've seen now is that now we see the situation that a junior person whose job is on the line, who needs the publication for the career and all that sort of stuff, that I've never seen 10 years ago. I'd never had that a junior co-author wouldn't pull that weight. Now I see this all the time. And I think one of the reasons for that is that, you know, they've all written their big job market paper. They pulled this one big paper through 4 rounds, 3 years at ISR or whatever, right? You know, they know what it takes. And they know what it means to be a lead author, and they know what it means that you do 80% of the work, and then there's 2 more people on the paper that have together done 20%. So now I think some of them consciously, unconsciously, they're like, oh, great. Now I'll be the third author. I can
be the slacker.
Relax.
It's my turn.
Yeah, I'll be the slacker. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying that they do this, you know, deliberately or whatever, but I think they're all being a little bit too strategic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, I mean, come on, speak up, say something, do something, you know, like give me more, give us more. Even though you're just going to be bloody 5th author or 3rd author or whatever, you know, it's not you, but you know, it's all our paper and we're trying to make it work. And I think they're all being way too strategic. They all seem to have a very clear view of, I'm 4th author. This means I'm just going to contribute that much and not else, and still win this publication. And I want to get away from that mindset. Yeah.
If you're not adding paragraphs ever to the paper, and if you're not aware, you've never read a paper in the area that the paper is contributing to, and yet you put your name on it. Like, I would never put my name on a paper that I don't buy everything that's written in it and haven't read. You know, it's just a matter of personal pride, right?
Exactly.
I'm not going to do that. And I think if you are
protection. I don't want to be called up in bed and say like, yeah, and talk about this paper where your name is on there, and I can't.
Yeah, because
so if in doubt whether I've done enough, and if in doubt whether I know what this paper is about, I'm pulling my name off it. I always have.
Well, you know, the other thing to protect your reputation is make sure you know where the data came from, what the data is. You and I have both seen this. Even there are, of course, and we've had an episode on people faking their data and doing the gross. I mean, that's the worst thing you could do as an academic, because our whole the research scholarship is predicated on honesty, right? And if you lie, that's just a house that we're counting on people to present what they did faithfully. And we've seen situations, some of which are not publicized, that there's clear faking of data, because this research and the incentive to publish is so great. People will sometimes, you know, maybe fudge. I've seen so many different things. And we've talked about it on that episode about bad behavior. Right. But it's your job. If you're on a paper and you don't know exactly where the data came from, when it came from there, and that the people, right, then you have no business being on that paper. You should take yourself off of it. Plain and simple, right?
Plain and simple. Yeah, I agree. So that's the second rule, right? So contribute more, not less, always.
You know what? I think and this is funny. So to go with that rule, always contribute more rather than less. But with that is especially junior people. Now, I don't think senior people have this problem, because senior people, if you've succeeded enough and you're working with other senior people, we all know sometimes someone's better, sometimes whatever, and we'll work with each other, right? We don't worry about it too much. If someone's doing anything, we're fine with it. Junior people, however, often have a lot of resentment. Right? They have resentment not just for other junior people that aren't carrying their weight, but they have resentment of the senior people. Like I've actually heard, and this was back in my PhD, some of my fellow PhD students were like, all he does is tells us to do, never does anything himself, right? Like people resent it. And I've done X number of papers and now his name's on my papers, right? Meaning the senior person. And they're really resenting the fact that they have to write their own papers. And they discount the fact that this person's reading the paper, giving him feedback, meeting with them, possibly getting him data, doing all the things that senior people do. And then they'll resent and wonder, and they think they're helping. Trust me, no junior person is helping my career at this point, right? I'm a full professor. I've got more papers in the pipeline than I should have. True that. I'm not doing my own work. And it takes me more effort to work with other people on their papers than it does for me to get out my own work, right? I don't need another publication with a junior person. If I do it, I'm being generous. I like the junior person. I like their research. There's something about the relationship that I want to invest in. Trust me, I'm giving way more than I'm getting out of that relationship.
I was pointing at my notes while you were talking, because this is the next rule that I wrote down before we talked. So the way that I put it is, junior people always underestimate the contribution that senior people make, and senior people always overestimate what they contribute to the paper.
Oh, yeah. Well, doesn't everybody do that?
Yeah, well, probably, but
overestimate their own, underestimate others.
That's right. I find myself in that trap all the time, where I'm getting furious at my co-authors, like, don't you see all the stuff that I've done? Maybe I should be first author here, not second or third or whatever, right? So I find myself thinking that, and I'm like, hang on, I'm overestimating as well as everybody else is underestimating, because this contributing to a paper is writing matters, I think, but I think it matters because it's the clearest form of documenting and evidencing that you contribute. Well, it's the simplest form, right? You want to show that you contribute. Well, here's a page that you've written. That's as clear as gold, right? So that's simple, but there's more, right? There could be the idea in the talk. There could be the great insight how to turn this analysis around. There could be this other beautiful
ideas are slippery, though. Yeah, ideas are slippery, because I could say that was my idea. So therefore, and look, it's published. It was my idea. And the problem with ideas is they have many fathers, right? When I contribute an idea to an article, who knows where I actually got it? It might have come from a conversation with the lead author or somewhere else, but then the lead author doesn't really remember me contributing in the conversation. A week later, they think about it, have the same, everybody has this idea. The idea itself is not, I don't think, enough for a paper. I'll give people ideas freely when I meet with them. I don't want to give examples of papers that are published, but as an editor, as a reviewer, I give ideas freely. The idea, I don't think, is that much of it's executing the idea that is the contribution. An idea alone, I frankly don't think that's worthy of a publication. If you're just there running your mouth and you're another junior person and you're like, look, my idea was taken up, that's a pretty weak contribution if you're not actually writing it up and putting some rigor behind it, right?
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking that, so we said, like, okay, writing matters, and you said it earlier. Maybe we want to reinforce it a little bit. Seeing the data matters, doesn't it? Like, as a co-author, I think you want to see the data and not just believe that you've talked to these 40 people that you interviewed or whatever, but really look at, like, for example, sometimes what I do is, like, if it's a quantitative paper, give me the data. I want to run some of the stats myself. Like,
oh, crap, really?
Well, sometimes, now very rarely, because the reality is that I haven't done a lot of the stats programming, the actual coding myself in
Yeah.
many years. So I know it, but I'm very bad at it. I'm very inefficient at it. So all the junior people, they're much quicker than me, right? I understand the code, but I forgot where to put the commas and stuff. So, and it's really difficult to get back into it.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I get around that. This is one of the ways that I get around the data. So I'll give you, I'm lately getting into these experiments, right? So this is an experiment we did, and I was certainly part of the design of the experiment. And then they collected the data. And there are 3 junior co-authors, 2 of us senior guys on this paper. I go over the results very closely and make them explain every single result to me. So I'll be sitting there. What is it? What is this? And then I make sure at least 2, and in this case, all 3 are beating on the data. And I know they have calls in between calls with me. And then that way I don't ever have to look at the data, but I make sure I understand everything that's going on. And I kind of trust that, these young guys are going to keep track of it, and they just are explaining everything to me. And so I'm hands-on in the sense that I'm not just letting them publish the data and then writing the back end or helping them think it. I'm getting my hands dirty, sort of, but I'm not actually doing data analysis on these, right? I don't even do R. I taught one class of R in my entire life, and it was 5 years ago, and I just did enough to
I've
teach
never
the
taught
class.
it, but I could get it. But, I grew up with a different generation of stats tools like SPSS and SAS and Literal and these sorts of things before Python and R and stuff like that, right? So I know it works, but I'm really shitty at it. So, and it's difficult to get back into it, right? So now I would be a very bad method person, even though I know what I want to do, but I'm really bad at just putting the code down.
So you don't need to see the data. Now, I'll tell you that with qualitative. Qualitative. Okay. Our buddy Stefan does that, actually. He won't write it without getting into the data. And I will do that with qualitative. But there again, I don't want to see the pure data. I want them to, sometimes I'll read an interview or do something like that. But for the most part, I just want to go, show me this story, show me that story, and then I'll get into it, right? But I guess even there, I want to see the results of the analysis with my co-authors. But I think the lead author should do the
actually, I try to be part of some of the data collection because I want to be in the context as well. I want to see the company. I want to be there. I want to talk to them, that I have a better understanding of the case. It's really difficult to co-author a qualitative piece if you don't know the context in the data, if you don't know it, if you just see coding trees and stuff, I don't get it, right? So I need more. And usually I try to do that by saying like, okay, you do 30 interviews. Okay, I'll come along for, 10 of them or whatever, how many I can do. If we do observations, company visits, I'll come along for the first couple,
really?
And talk to you. Yeah, I do that. Well, as much as that's possible in my life. But yeah, absolutely. Right. So we're doing a new set of studies now with certain providers of certain augmented reality stuff. So I'll go to the first couple of you because I want to, try it out myself and see what it looks like and feels like and how these companies are run and whatnot. And then, so the junior people will take over most of the data collection from there on in. But that's how I handle it, sort of getting access to seeing the data a little bit, getting a little bit of a sense to it. That's what I mean. Sometimes it doesn't scale very well. You could do that, but you can't do 30 of them, No. It all takes time, and it's a visit here and a trip there.
And especially in Germany, because so many of your PhD students, for example, go to industry. And this is what sucks. It's like I have these great collaborations started with Germans over the years.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to bring that up
then
too.
They go to industry, and it's like, crap. I kind of invested a lot of effort into that collaboration. And there's literally the only way, like our buddy Christoph Rosenkrantz and I, right? We had a student that we worked with. We had an Academy of Management paper. This guy, it was really cool. And the theory was really cool. It's out there, but he went off to industry. And then Christoph and I look at it and we're thinking, okay, one of us should lead it because this should be published, and neither of us have gotten around to it yet. It just has sat there now. It's probably getting close to a decade, right?
I wanted to bring that up too, because I have the same situation. So what I've done the last couple of months, I was working on the 4th round revision of a paper with 2 PhD students, both of which have left for industry 2-3 years ago. And other papers there, and I still liked the paper, and I still believe in it. So I'm pushing this through the last 3 rounds. Like this is in round 4 now. Yeah. Well, what else are you gonna do? They're not doing it.
Your first author?
No.
Really?
No. And I'm a little bit upset about it, but it's fine. It's one of the author's main piece and whatever. anyway, so it's a little bit a point of a frustration.
No,
but
I think you should take over
but,
first authorship. I think, well, maybe not now if the expectation was that your student would be first author and that you'll see it through. But I think future with this German system where everyone goes to industry and they don't have I think you have to set that expectation that if you stay in academia and you lead this paper throughout, then you stay first author. The moment you're not leading it anymore is the moment you're no longer first author. And people have to know that, right?
Yeah, that could be a way of preventing this. But this is what I like. It reminded me so much about the episode of Resilience. Because I tell you what, like going through this paper for the fourth round in 4 years in the data, doing all of this myself, that was just grit. Honestly, this was brutal. It wasn't fun at all. I didn't enjoy that, and I was so relieved when I finally sent it off again.
And if you think about it, Wrecker, the person, and this is what happens. This is what I thought before coming into the academic game. I thought that once you finish a paper, you send it, you submit it, and then there's some revisions, and then you're published, right? What we know now, having done it for a little while, is the first submission is the beginning of the process, right? Usually the first 2 rounds are when you're doing more work. Then sometimes you got to do an entirely new lit review. You have to do sometimes you're getting new data, right? It's a totally different. That's when the effort starts with the first submission. So if these guys think, hey, this was my dissertation, I sent it, now Wrecker gets a hit from my dissertation, they don't realize that you doing 3 rounds with their paper is more work than they did actually to get that first version.
Well, to be like, so we're doing this, and I've done this in the past, and there's some papers where I'm third or fourth author where the realities after the first run you took over because these people, I don't blame them, right? So this game is only relevant as long as you're in the bubble. You're an academic. If you're outside of the bubble, and then they all leave the bubble and saying like, look, I'm gonna keep on working on the paper because I really want this. Well, it takes exactly 2.5 weeks until you don't care, and rightfully so. It just doesn't matter in the outside world. It doesn't. Like if you went off to be in a startup or something, then you don't care and you shouldn't care, and that's fine. So I always tell them, look, that's nice of you to say, but I don't believe it, and this is not what's gonna come down. You're not gonna do it, and that's fine because you won't have the time or the motivation or the ambition. Why would you care about this, ISR paper or whatever, when you have your industry in your life and everything else?
Yeah. To industry, if I have an ISR or MISQ, or if I have an AMSIS paper, it's the same thing. On your resume, it shows you have an academic publication.
That's right.
And you and I could have written an AMSIS paper instead of had this call.
In an hour. Probably. Yeah. Well, we once wrote, like in wrapping this up, I once wrote a paper with a friend who was like, hey, there's a special issue coming up, but the deadline is in 3 days. And he responded with, no time to overthink it. Let's do it. So we wrote this paper in 3 days, and it eventually made it, I think. It did make it eventually, but it was, obviously a conceptual paper, no data, blah, blah, blah. You can't do a new thing in 3 days, but sure, you can write a paper in 3 days. Probably not the best paper ever.
Well, Philip Huckel, Matt Germonprez, and Aaron Schechter and I wrote a paper on bots and Kubernetes. It was published in IEEE Computer. We did it in 1 day. We did some polishing afterwards, but it was pretty much just from, 8 a.m. to 5 that day. We did the bulk of the paper. And then for a couple of days, maybe we did some polishing, but then it was submitted. Then we did a revision, of course, and whatever. But that was like a 1 day paper.
All right, Nick. So what did we learn today? Right. So the golden rules of co-authorship. Number 1, it's not fair and it shouldn't be fair. Number 2, contribute more, not less. Number 3, if in doubt, pull yourself off the paper. Right.
Yeah.
And then 4 is, I guess, always be mindful that you're overestimating what you contribute and you're underestimating what everybody else does. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think sometimes, I'll spend a day writing a paragraph. That paragraph may or may not matter, but the fact is, someone could look at that and go, that's one shitty paragraph. Who cares? But, and I would look at it and go, I spent an entire day on this person's paper. Right. So yeah, I think that last rule, as far as the mindset, is just keep in mind, you think you did more than you actually did. And others probably think you did less. Similarly, right? Whatever you just said. Oh, geez, I'm taking your very concise summary and I'm destroying it.
Well, this is the start of the podcast season. We have to get back into the flow. We can't just expect after 2 months break to be nice in the flow. But we'll we're back, I guess, right? We're back.
Yes,
We'll
my
come up
brother.
with. Well, we have a few guest lines up already, which we'll have over the next couple of weeks. People can expect a usually bi-weekly dose of episodes, right?
Yeah, let's foreshadow. Well, let's
Okay, go.
foreshadow a little bit of what's happening because, as we run around, it seems that especially junior people who listen to us a lot, like PhD students and junior faculty, are all about how, yeah, all
Publish.
that other stuff you talk about is fine, but I want to know how to publish a paper. I want to
Yeah.
know how to get papers published. So we're taking that to heart. I think in the next episode, you and I'll give us our rules.
Oh, tricks, not rules, just tricks. Tricks up the
Rules,
sleeve.
tricks, whatever, as both authors and editors of how we think you can get published. And then we're going to have some senior editors of some of the top journals
Not
come
senior
on.
editors. We have the chief
editors in chief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So we will talk to most, if not all, of the main journals in IS. They'll come on the show and we do an episode with each of them over the next couple of weeks. So we've asked most of them. Most of them said yes already. All of them have heard about it. Yeah. So we'll see what we can do, and of course, in between, we still have rooms for other topics. And as usual, if you have any topic suggestions, shoot us an email, and we'll consider it. We might not do it, but we'll consider it.
Exactly. All right, my brother. I will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.